we're going to move on to the Arizona Cardinals. And Josh, originally this was going to be the Patriots, but Joe got very angry with you towards the end of the show last week when I announced the Patriots, and he said, no, it's not happening. So you went ahead and threw the Arizona Cardinals in here so that Joe could talk about his beloved Patriots next week. Last season, 4-13, same record as the Washington Commanders. They brought their coach back, Jonathan Gannon. Obviously, they just signed him last year. Drew Pensing is going to run the offense. Similar scheme to what we saw from Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. And so very similar to what we probably saw from Arizona last year, though you hope to see more of Kyler Murray. Starting quarterback is going to be Kyler Murray. Running back, it's likely going to be a 1-2 situation because it's always been that. James Conner's the one. Rookie Trey Benson is the 2. James Conner does not play every game of the season. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the wide receiver 1, and then there is not much else. You have Michael Wilson at 2. Zay Jones just recently signed at 3. Greg Dortch has been their wide receiver 4 seemingly forever. However, they have a stud at tight end. It took him a season to develop, but we saw the best out of Trey McBride last season. And Josh, let's go ahead and start with the tight end. Let's talk about Trey McBride. I am seeing from a lot of people smarter than me, Trey McBride as their number 1 fantasy tight end heading into this season.
Number 1 is interesting. I don't know that I have him that high. I have him right now projected at 84 receptions, 844 yards, 5 touchdowns, which, I mean, that's pushing 200 fantasy points. So he's definitely more than likely going to end up in my top 4, I would say. But the one thing that I love about this is this scheme is derived from Stefanski's time in Cleveland, right? So when you look at last year in Arizona and then the 3 previous years in Cleveland, and we'll start in the year 2020, the tight end target share in these offenses, 27.7, 27.3, 24.6. And then last year, Arizona targeted the tight end position 32.25% of the time. Now, granted, they didn't have a legitimate wide receiver 1 last year, which kind of inflates that. You now have a legitimate wide receiver 1 in Marvin Harrison Jr. But this kind of goes to my point here. This Cleveland system works between the wide receiver 1 and the tight end 1.
Yep.
Trey McBride is the tight end 1, and it's not close. So if they're going to approach, let's say, a 27% target share, you might be looking at about 25% going to Trey McBride, while Marvin Harrison kind of gets up to speed. We'll say I think he's probably the most pro-ready player in this draft. But there's just so much to like here because Kyler obviously now becomes 2 years removed from the ACL, should be back in full swing a year into this system where he can sort of get comfortable. They've made some improvements along the offensive line. You bring in Jonah Williams to man the right side. You move Paris Johnson back to his more natural left tackle side. They've got the pieces there in front of Kyler to protect him. Give him time now to find his weapons. He spent all of the back half of last year developing a rapport with Trey McBride. So who do you think he's looking to first?
100%.
It's going to be Trey McBride. Yep. Like I have McBride right now at 114 targets, and that feels low.
Yeah.
I don't often say that about a tight end. So
I have him at 124, but that's still below Marvin Harrison. I think Marvin Harrison is about to step in here and take the world by storm. I have him at 149. So
yeah, I have Marvin Harrison at 137. I have him at a 24% target share. So yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. This system is it's inside out. It's inside for McBride. It's outside for Marvin Harrison. So if you want pieces of this offense, it's Trey McBride. Almost right there at the top for me. So I
want to see where his ADP ends up because one of the things I noticed
right now he's tight end 3.
I mean round. Do you know what round that's falling?
I believe it was the 5th round last time I checked.
I'm okay with that because one of the things I noticed when doing my projections this year, everybody knows I am the biggest advocate for Travis Kelce on the face of the planet. One of the things I noticed is I have the tight ends way closer. We saw Travis Kelce take that obvious step back last season. I have Trey McBride taking a step up. Kelce's still my tight end 1. McBride is still my tight end 2, but they are like a 1 point per game difference, if that, half a point per game. I am very much in on Trey McBride. So if the cost is right, I'm there. The issue is if he's tight end 3 going in the 5th round, I imagine Laporta's tight end 2. That means I can.
Laporta right now is tight end 1 on underdog at the 3.9.
So Kelce's 2 Or
Kelsey's
okay.
2 with the 4.4.
My point still stands though. I can wait and get Mark Andrews. I can wait and get Evan Ingram. I don't know that I'm paying up for tight end this year, even though I am in love with Trey McBride. Straight up love this kid, Josh. I remember rookie drafts 2 years ago where nobody really wanted him because he didn't go until the 3rd round of the NFL draft. And I'm like, he's still the first tight end taken. And we loved this kid in college. So I bought up all the Trey McBride. And Josh, as you're fully aware, I already had all the Travis Kelce. So now I just have a plethora of riches at tight end. There's one league where I have Kelsey, Laporta, and Trey McBride. I should be trading these people away, but I kind of just want to laugh at all of my league mates when they get 6 points out of their tight end. And I have 40 on my bench every single week because they just kept letting me get these guys and they're idiots. But regardless, I agree. McBride is this offense, and we actually don't have Harrison as a guy we're going to talk about, but that's because that's all we've talked about for the last month. I want to move to oh shit, Crispy telling me to stun on him. I want to move to quarterback, Josh, because I have a conundrum. The hype around Kyler Murray and one other quarterback, Anthony Richardson, that we'll talk about later. I'm not bought in. I don't hold grudges, but I will never forget on draft night when I told Austin that Kyler Murray slotted in and my initial rankings is like QB 16, and Austin told me get a different process. Like he was not happy about that. Josh, I did my rankings and he moved up to 14. I don't know that I'm bought in, and I'm seeing a lot of really great stats about what Kyler Murray did in 2020 and what he did in 2021 and what he did pre-injury and this, that, and the other. But he is injured and he is a little bit older, and he does not have, when he was putting up those numbers, he had DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Larry Fitzgerald for one of those seasons, Rondale Moore. Right now, it is Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, and that is it. And I just don't know if it's going to benefit Kyler Murray as much as it's going to benefit these wide receivers.
Yeah, I think the thing that gets me with Kyler is that which Kyler are we getting, right? From a rushing perspective.
Exactly.
Because the first 2 years, he was over 1,300 combined rushing yards. He ran a lot. He had 15 touchdowns on the ground. Obviously, we know about the injuries from last year, or coming back from the injury last year, suffering the injury in 2022. But 2021, he took a huge step down from a rushing perspective. His attempts per game were down to 6.3. His yards per attempt were down to 4.8. Only had 5 touchdowns, barely over 400 yards in rushing, total rushing. Like that, we kind of want that like 500 is sort of like that rushing floor for quarterbacks for us, right? He hasn't had more than 3 touchdowns on the ground the last 2 years.
Yep.
Now, sure, maybe some of that's a product of, playing less games, but where he's at from a rushing standpoint, I mean, he was averaging about 38 yards per rush attempt in 2022, which again is still kind of down from where he was those first, like it was kind of like in between where he was the first 2 years, but it's not that 51.2 yards per game where he was at in 2020. Okay. So I think if he's somewhere above that like 40 range, I think that's really where we want him to be, because he brings 40 yards. That's a guaranteed 4-point floor, right? You throw in the occasional touchdown. So if he gives us, let's say 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns with 42 yards per game, that to me is a top 8 quarterback in fantasy, because we know what he can do with his arm.
And I'll give you that. The issue is there's 2 things that bother me about that. Is he's only crossed that 6 touchdown mark one time, and that was back in 2020. And I've been doing some of the research on the 2020 year of offense, and it was heads and tails better than any year of offense we have seen in the NFL, previous and since, on how many touchdowns were scored by every position. So I don't like looking at that 2020 offense. I just don't know if we're going to get that many rushing touchdowns. And then here's my other thing, Josh. When you look at the Arizona Cardinals as a team, and I understand Kyler has been hurt, but as a team, they have only thrown 35 touchdowns combined over the last 2 seasons. They have not crossed 20 touchdowns once. And obviously we hope for better things, but to get to 20 touchdowns are Harrison and McBride both scoring 12? Because I think that's what's got to happen here.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to see the ball being spread out a little bit. I have Harrison at 8 touchdowns. I have McBride at 5. I have the running backs combining for 3. So, like, I might be a little low on the touchdown side of things for Kyler because I have him at 22 passing touchdowns. And like I said, I kind of, only project them out for, 16 versus the 17.
Hey,
I only
Josh,
have him at 23 total.
Guess how many touchdowns I have him projected for? This is weird, man. What a weird show.
Oh, we're thinking too much along the same lines. I don't like it.
Yeah, we've been doing.
Where's Joe? We need to start throwing verbal jabs
exactly.
here. But like, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I the wide receivers to me are very underwhelming. Like, we love to, to bring hotness with the Greg Dortch nicknames and all that stuff, but he's a Jag. You bring in Zay Jones, who's been productive, but if he was still really good, the Jags probably wouldn't move on from him. Michael Wilson, they drafted last year. We saw a little bit of pop from him. Maybe he's better as a 2 and he can grow into that role. That's true. Like, this isn't an offense that's going to target the wide receiver 2 100 times when you have a really quality tight end there. So, like, I only have the wide receiver 2, Michael Wilson, at 63 targets. There's not a lot to go around here. Like, to me, you're investing in either one or both of these running backs, Marvin Harrison or Trey McBride. And then, of course, Kyler. Like, that's where this offense fits. But I think that because they're still young, like McBride's going into year 3, Marvin Harrison, obviously year 1, Trey Benson year 1, James Conner probably on his way out.
Michael Wilson
Kyler's
year
a veteran,
2, if you believe. So,
yeah, like Kyler's going into, he's the seasoned veteran on this team, but this is only his 2nd year in this offense. He only played 8 games in this offense. So for all intents and purposes, he's a rookie in this system. So there's still a lot for him to grow into. So that's why I don't think that he's going to come in and throw 26, 27 touchdowns this year. But, 22, 23 for this offense might be on the lower side, but it's definitely an uptick when you consider where this offense has been over the last 2 years.
He meant 3 receiving touchdowns. I think you missed part of that conversation. We were talking about how Kyler spreading the ball out for passing touchdowns because we're worried about the amount of passing touchdowns. So, yeah, it's just 3 receiving touchdowns. We expect way more rushing touchdowns out of them, which, again, could benefit Kyler, but I haven't seen it since that 1 year where he scored 11. So I find that very, very interesting. Gator brings up that Call of Duty doesn't have a new game out yet, but every November that new game comes out. So that's not going to work out real well. And then I got to get him up here. This is not the Anthony Richardson show yet, but the roll says Drake May over Anthony Richardson. He's bringing the hot takes. The roll is going to be my guest on our mock draft show on Saturday. So tune in. It sounds like it's going to be a fun one. Also mentioned 60 subs away from getting super chats on his channel. Roll, drop it in the chat. Let's see if we can get you up some subscribers on today's show now that we have all these new people with us and we can get some of them heading over your way. Josh, let's finish up the Cardinals talking about their rookie running back, Trey Benson. And my biggest thing I want to address with Benson is how many touches do you think he can get in year 1?
So I have him right now projected at 131 touches when you combine rushing and reception. So it's going to be interesting because, again, it's going to mirror that Cleveland system. We saw Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt coexist, right?
Yeah.
The 2 healthy seasons that Kareem Hunt was there with Nick Chubb, he had 123 or more carries in both of them and 198 in one of them, which was the year that Nick Chubb got hurt. So, and he topped 44 targets in each of those seasons also. So, like, there's going to be a very solid role for Trey Benson in this offense. Not to mention, James Conner's never played more than 15 games in a season. Exactly. So there's going to be games where Trey Benson is the RB1, right? It could be 2 games. It could be 5 games. It could be 7 games. We don't know. So there's going to be plenty of work for Trey Benson to get. And he was a guy that a lot of people had as their RB1 going into this class. I know we talked a little bit earlier about Jonathan Brooks, but there's room for Trey Benson to have a very significant role in this scheme. I don't love his current ADP on Underdog right now. It's RB28. It feels a little bit like rookie fever. But again, like if you think that ceiling is Kareem Hunt in Cleveland, I think that's right up there because Kareem Hunt had a top 12 season in Cleveland as the backup. So it's not unheard of, especially if he scores a ton of touchdowns.
Ratio points out that the Cowboys would kill for Benson. I would say the Cowboys should have killed for Benson probably Ezekiel Elliott just to make sure that they needed him, because somebody needs to die there, because I don't know what's going on with that running back room and how they passed on these running backs. But I remember Josh Jagger May had Trey Benson as his RB1 in this class when we
and
talked
I know
about
Gator
that.
too. He talked a lot about Benson on Mocking with the Stars on Monday night when they were doing all those rookie drafts. Benson was his RB1 too. So, like I said, there's plenty in this community that love Trey Benson. And you can say what you will about, oh, well, he's stuck behind James Conner. They're going to use both backs. James Conner is a very good running back. But when you look at the quality of running backs behind James Conner last year, it was a who's who of dog shit. Like, it was awful. So now you come in, you bring in a solidified RB2 that has that RB1. I can carry the load upside for those games that James Conner inevitably misses. There's room for, like, hey, this is a great zero RB target, in my opinion. I think his ADP right now is a little too insulated for him to kind of to fit in that category.
It'll be interesting to see where it falls to in August when real drafts start. Not to say best ball drafts right now aren't real drafts. I just mean it's going to be interesting when you get more casual players in, because again, you're right. James Conner doesn't play 16 games, and you said, he could be good for 5 games. Let's not also forget where those 5 games are likely to be. It's likely to be the last 5 games of the season. And I think Trey Benson could be a championship fantasy running back by the time this is all said and done. Josh, let's finish up with the bets on the Arizona Cardinals. This is where one I wanted to talk about comes into play. So we have a little bit here when it comes to Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, not a lot of bets. I honestly think there are only Marvin Harrison Jr. bets right now. 1050 on the receiving yards. Robbie and I both go over. Josh, I have Marvin Harrison finishing the season with over 1,200 receiving yards. Where do you have him in your projections?
Right now, I have him at 1140. That could very easily change once I go through.
Still a good 90 yards over his over, though. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, he's going to be the top option as a rookie in this offense, and he's going to a situation where he has an established quarterback. There's no reason that he shouldn't blow past 1,050 yards.
Yeah, I agree. And then Josh, I'm going to throw a ratio up here. He says Arizona could be a sleeper. He's not going to lie. And you saw a little bit of a bet there for the Arizona Cardinals as well.
Hey, on the DraftKings Sportsbook, Arizona's plus 1,300 to win the division. Here's the fun thing. We talk about the Rams kind of being on an upswing, right? Like, they bring in they get Stafford healthy. Puka Nacua is a revelation. Kieran Williams shooting out like a cannon out of the gate. He's now dealing with another foot injury.
Yeah.
Stafford is another year older. He's been hurt the last couple of years. The team is young. You don't know how young players are going to, continue to grow or crumble under pressure. San Francisco, Super Bowl hangover. Happened to the Eagles. Could very well happen to the Niners. Why can't they sneak in and make some waves, right? Like, Jonathan Gannon, for all his faults, the defense played well in spots last year. He's got another year with his guys in the system. They bring in some key contributors. They still need some work at corner, I think, but you could say that about a lot of teams.
Yeah. According to Joe, there are no good corners.
There are no good corners, right? So if the offense can do and make that, like, take that next step, like the second year in the system with Petzing, this could be a team that could sneak in and win this division. Like, it's only a matter of time before, San Francisco starts getting hurt like they had been, and then crying foul because nothing is breaking their way. And, the Rams dealing with injuries because they're an older team. The Seahawks, I really have no idea what to make of the Seahawks, in all honesty. Like, I want to believe in them, and I think that offense is going to be really exciting. But if you told me that they only win 5 games next year, I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
So why not? Plus 1,300?
I was going to say, this is way better than your Washington pick, because I do like this. $1 wins me what? $13 here, 13 extra money. It's not the worst thing in the entire world. I will say my research took me a completely different way. I don't like any of these teams really. And so I was like, when I'm looking at my bets, I was like, what happens if I parlay all 3 of them to miss the playoffs? And that actually pays negative 141, which isn't quite a double up. But if I can pay $14 to win 10, I'll take it. I don't think these teams are going to win their division, Josh. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. So I went very negative, and I placed that bet. I put $14.10 for all of them to miss the playoffs just to try to win an easy $10. see how that goes. I don't bet big, but I have fun with it. But I will say, I might go back and look at some of these Arizona bets. Plus 1,300, and you make a compelling argument, and Ratio brings up Aaron Donald also gone. That defense lost its heart with the Rams. So San Francisco is probably their primary competition